Okay, U.S. history students of Miss Overton, you're back. Well, last time we were talking, we were in the European theater, and that was standard 19C. Dwight Eisenhower was a main general. He was the main leader. He later becomes our president following Truman at the end of World War II. So anyway, we've looked at the Pacific theater. We've looked at the European. Now we need to examine the battle on the home front. All right, so the home front was fought with a lot of propaganda, of course, posters, to encourage the war cause. Never could have been done. The war couldn't have been fought, though, without what the citizens of the United States, and a lot to do with women, how they were helping to win the war. Thanks to us being a capitalist society, we were able to mobilize, create these mass products, these mass military operations. It was a conversion, and similar to what you're seeing right now, the talk for the coronavirus, how we're changing factories over from cars to creating jeeps and weapons and missiles and airplane tanks. So one of the most famous posters here is Rosie the Riveter. She explains, or is the poster lady for how women helped win. They filled those jobs of the men more than in World War I and got that mass production out that was necessary. Okay, the medical supplies too. So what else were they doing here on the home front? You saw in World War I, they were planting victory gardens. Again, that happens. People are rationing. We've got more cars now. There was a great cause to ration silk. Women wore nylon hose, and you needed that. Now, you did without the nylon hose. That was used for making parachutes. Rubber. They had big drives for collecting your scrap rubber to go on the tires of the Jeeps, the rafts. Everything's been converted over for the wartime mobilization. Okay. All right, war bonds. Talked to y'all about that last time. That's a way for our now expanded government to help raise revenue for this war cause. I explained to y'all that my family had some of those, and I was able to get a little bit from that from my grandparents. Rationing is huge. Talked to you earlier about how my grandmother learned to make a lemon meringue pie from rationing sugar. Gasoline, sugar, lots of things were rationed during this time. And how they did it was you had to collect a book of stamps. Once you got a book filled, you didn't just get these products for free. You had to go in and then purchase what you needed. In particular, I remember my grandmother talking about the gasoline and the sugar. Okay, this is what the women did on the home front. Okay, they were filling that void, these jobs. We're going to look at the executive orders here in just a minute. I want to show you one. We're going to look at some things with Dr. Seuss too, how he put out his own wartime propaganda. And it's pretty interesting character. All right, so this cartoon's explaining the war bonds. Cages cost money. We got to get those prisoners of the Nazi prisoners. So buy more U.S. bonds and stamps so that we have the money, the revenue. All right, now we're going to look at more the discrimination through the wartime executive orders on the home front. First one I want to look at is the internment of the Japanese. This one, if you zoom in here, okay, not sure if this is looking at Pearl Harbor or right before the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which does end the war completely. Remember, the war in the European theater ends with the Battle of Berlin, but Japanese do not surrender. They continue to fight. That's their motto. All right, so here you're seeing a lot of Japanese lined up. They all look the same. They're getting what's TNT. That's a type of a bomb. And he's looking on with the states you see in the background of California, Oregon, and Washington. So we're waiting for the signal from home. You need to understand that the Japanese were interned through executive order by Roosevelt. An executive order is different from a law. It doesn't have to be approved by Congress. But this law was put into effect because we have so much great fear of the Japanese Americans. And there was also fear of Italian Americans and German Americans. But there were simply too many of those to round up. And not to be saying anything not politically correct, but it was easy to identify the Japanese Americans also. So they were interned and placed in these camps in the West until the war was over, similar to concentration camps. Eleanor Roosevelt was very much against this. I said it was similar to concentration camps. They were different. They were like prisons, like jails, but no one was killed, gassed, like in a concentration camp. So Eleanor Roosevelt was very much against these, especially after visiting the Japanese internment camps. She tried to get Roosevelt to end that. This is a Dr. Seuss cartoon of mocking Americans. The Americans sure can attack themselves. Cheap gunning for Eleanor Roosevelt. She didn't like what her husband was doing, interning the Japanese. You gotta know this for the standards, the internment of the Japanese. The next one you need to know about is executive order that ends discrimination. All right, right here, take a look at this one. The guy who makes a mock of democracy. They're saying the Pledge of Allegiance of a flag. He stands up, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and he stands for racial prejudice, and he's saying the pledge while he's standing on a cellar door where he is keeping all those kids in the cellar down. That's what he's saying. I pledge allegiance to all except for those that I keep in the cellar. So, I'm going to take you back to the slideshow and we're going to wrap it up quickly. A. Philip Randolph is a leader of the Pullman's organization. Pullman was a job that with the railroads a lot of African Americans had. And he's a leader that he don't like this discrimination. Why aren't the black and white fighting together? Why don't they get as many jobs? So he sees it as an opportunity to gather. You probably thought the March on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr. was the only one we ever had. A. Philip Randolph organized the very first March on Washington. He takes the idea, give us jobs, end discrimination, or we're going to march on Washington. FDR was greatly fearful that Hitler was going to see this as a huge weakness of the United States. He begged him to call it off. Randolph did not. So after that, A. Philip Randolph, Roosevelt issues Executive Order 8802 that ends discrimination in the industries of defense. Okay, not all jobs in America, but anywhere they're creating defense jobs. Okay, all right. The executive order that rounded up all of our Japanese Americans, 1966. They were interned. Many of them gave up their homes, their businesses. Horrible thing that we did as Americans to the Japanese. There was reason to be fearful, but that's not always the right way to handle things, the way this all happened. But let's take a quick look at your review questions from this unit, and then we'll call it the end of our Standard 19 lessons by Miss Overton. All right, so how did rationing impact mobilization? We'd have never won the war if women hadn't have stepped up and all of the American citizens and rationed in the ways I just explained to you. You feel free to take a picture of this, guys. How do women impact war mobilization? War wouldn't have simply been won had it not for them filling those voids. How did the African Americans impact wartime mobilizations? You saw a second Great Migration where African Americans have more of a home. They flee the Jim Crow South, and they are now in the urban cities. Urban cities are more of a heavier African American population than they are the white. And then the last two are these executive orders impacted by A. Philip Randolph with that threatening of a march on Washington. Roosevelt desegregates the military, or the defense industry jobs. Truman later desegregates the military. We'll talk about that. Roosevelt uses his executive power to intern the Japanese Americans, put them in pretty much prison camps until the war was over. So guys, this is concluding the lessons for Standard 19, World War II, as we continue our digital learning. Stay strong. You're rocking this, guy, everybody. Thanks, U.S. History students.